All right, we made it to Daytona weekend. It's going to be hopefully a wreck fest for both races. That's what we're at least projecting, and that's the way that we're going to be building lineups this weekend. But it's myself and Kev of the Fast Cars, Fast Money crew. Going to be breaking down kind of our initial thoughts, strategy, lineup construction for both the Xfinity series and the Cup series. Both videos should be live right now up on our YouTube page. And then we're also going to be posting the spreadsheets over on Twitter. So if you want to pull it up, look at it while you're constructing lineups, or even ask us any questions, you can do that in the comments down below or over on Twitter. But real quickly, the race preview and initial thoughts is going to be very similar for both videos. But you've probably heard it all week long. The main thing you want to do this weekend is stack the back. What does that mean? We'll get to it when we talk about the drivers. But this is a weekend where you look at your slate and it's going to look completely different than it normally does. You want to leave a lot of money on the table. I'm not talking like $200 to $300. I'm talking like thousands and thousands of dollars. The reason that we want to stack the back is it's only a matter of time before they wad up the cars, they wreck, and there's a lot of accidents and people are being sent home on a flatbed. So there's a little bit of a different approach versus cash tournaments and single entry versus like GPP, like really big tournaments as far as kind of like your lineup goes. But we'll talk about that. But the really thing that only matters this weekend is place differential and ownership. And you need a lot of luck. This is, there's some skill, I would say, involved in lineup construction, but ultimately it just comes down to do your drivers avoid the wreck. And then we'll talk kind of our Xfinity approach versus our Cup approach. But our spreadsheet on the main page looks a little bit different than normal. We just have low interest for all the guys starting up front, and we have high interest for all the guys starting in the back. And we categorized the spreadsheet this week by starting position instead of salary, because salary really doesn't matter this weekend. But throwing it over to you, Kev, as you approach this weekend, what are some of your kind of initial thoughts and how are you kind of approaching this weekend from a lineup construction standpoint?
The first thing I noticed is Draftkings still trying to make the lineup construction quote unquote difficult by pricing up some guys starting farther back. They should never be priced that high. But a little bit I've messed around with so far, I hasn't really seen much of a difference with that. It doesn't really seem to affect it. I'm still pretty much able to get whoever, or am able to get whoever I want, and still have a bunch of money left over on the table. But we kind of said it before. I'm probably not going to have very many people. But if you're only running one line, I probably wouldn't have anybody inside the top 25. Or if you do, I probably wouldn't go above top 20. But if you're running multiple lines, I think it'd probably be a smart idea to have, most of your lines with guys starting farther back, because we know there's going to be at least one big wreck, probably two. And then just kind of stacking that. But if you have multiple lines, having some of those guys that are starting in, the top 10 or top 15, where, with this being the, I don't know, the draw system or kind of the formula, some of the better drivers are starting in the top 15. And as long as those drivers stay on the track, there's a higher likelihood that the better drivers and the better equipment are the ones that win. But there's just so much inherent risk in starting a guy that starts top 5 when there's a good chance that they're going to, from most likely no fault of their own, be taken out and packed up for the day, and they're just going to lose you a ton of points, which is kind of why we fall into the strategy of the farther back the better, because can't lose as many points when they wreck out. And as guys wreck out, their PD goes through the roof as they, guys that normally wouldn't even be competing for a top 25 or getting top 20s, top 15s, enough cars wreck out. Guy that normally finishes 25th, 28th could get a top 10, and it's just insane amount of PD.
Yeah, there's so much uncertainty that goes into these super speedway races. Maybe the only thing that is somewhat certain is where you expect it to be a wreck fest. They could very well not be a wreck fest. They could run single file and it might look very boring. And, if you are playing guys in the back, your line might look terrible, for a majority of the race. But it literally only takes, like Kev said, one or two wrecks to completely turn the slate upside down. And he talked about it. But the reason you want to play guys from the back is there's a high chance that some of your drivers are going to wreck out. So if you're playing JJ Yaley, for example, starting 34th, and he wrecks out, maybe he gets 0 or -2 points or something like that. It's not really going to hurt your line. Whereas if you play Justin Haley starting 9th and he wrecks out, he's giving you -20, -30 points. And that's really going to hurt your day. So what I would advise you guys to do is don't really worry so much about salary. Categorize the grid by starting position, and then just determine, okay, I want X amount of drivers starting from 25th to 40th. I want X amount of drivers starting from 13th to 24th, and I want X amount of drivers starting 1st to 12th. Now, historically, what we see is if you want to take down a big tournament, you do have to take some risks. And historically, there's usually one driver out of the top 12 who's optimal, usually two drivers out of the 13 to 24 range, and then usually three drivers out of the 25 to 40 range. That's usually what the optimal lineup looks like. But if you just want to cash and you want even a good chance of still being optimal, I would pick either 3 or 4 drivers from the back, and then probably your remaining drivers from kind of this 13th, 24th range, just because the chances of any of these cars wrecking are completely the same. And just because I'm playing a guy in the back and he runs multiple laps down, that might actually be a good thing, because if he's not in the lead pack, he's maybe not getting caught up in those wrecks, and he's just going to be a pure attrition play. So I think the only real strategy then when it comes to stacking the back is maybe pivoting off of some of the really high owned plays. So looking at the back of the field, Kev, are there any drivers back here that you think are going to carry kind of a lot of ownership?
I think there's kind of one elephant in the room, and Chase Briscoe there, starting 37th. Obviously, was great in the Xfinity series when he's there. Now he's not running there full time. So he's up in the Cup series and he's running pretty well there. So, I mean, for these guys in the back, he's definitely by far the best driver out of all of them. So I imagine he's going to carry a lot of ownership for, pretty obvious and well-deserved reasons there, which is why DraftKings tried to price him up to make a difference. But again, like I said, it doesn't really matter because you're going to have some $5,000-$6,000 guys and salary's not an issue.
Yeah, there's going to be, I think Chase Briscoe is probably be the highest owned driver, and he should score really well. I mean, he looks like the best play on the slate. But if you're building multiple lines, I'd advise you to play a lot of Briscoe, but don't go 100% in on any of these guys. Caesar Bassarella, or however the hell you pronounce his name, like he could outscore a JJA, a Brandon Brown, who might carry more ownership. Just because he starts that deep, and if he avoids the wreck, he could get top 20 finish, maybe even a top 10 finish. I mean, that might be crazy sounding, but it's possible. And I'd rather play drivers who have really high ceilings and low floors, with, even if they wreck, I still have a good chance of cashing, versus stacking a lot of these mid-tier drivers where if 1 or 2 of them wreck, like I'm automatically getting -15, -20 points. And it's really hard to come back from that. So I know that's not too insightful. I don't really know if there's anything else you really want to say, Kev. I guess the only other thing I would say is, this is usually a weekend where manufacturers work together. So like you'll see all the Chevys drafting together, all the Toyotas, all the Fords, and then more specifically, like, within the teams too. So all the junior motorsports cars, all the JGR cars, like they should all work together to try to advance their position, which sometimes really works out. Or if they're all running next to each other and there's a wreck, sometimes they all wreck out together. So it's just something to be aware of maybe, hey, this guy has drafting help and this guy doesn't. But I mean, other than that, I think you just jam in as many guys as you can, basically from 25th to 40th. And then if you are playing GPPs, take a couple risks of guys starting 24th, maybe up to first, mainly focusing kind of on that 24th to 13th range. But anything else you really want to add, Kev? Or
yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of got 2 things. One, kind of unlike normal, a lot of the accidents when you're running these super speedways start at the front of the pack. Those guys run in the top 10 because they're vying for position there at the end of the stages and to win the race, and stuff goes squirrely. And that's why the accidents get so big. They take out the whole field when they start at the front like that. We saw it. I mean, I guess the best example in recent memory would be Newman last year at Daytona, was in the lead and then, had that horrific accident, took out the whole field with him, and, went from winning the race to, not racing for a few races. And then the other thing would be, I'd just be kind of careful with your bankroll this week. I wouldn't go too crazy, too overboard. It's a lot more luck and a lot less skill and what have you involved this week. So I wouldn't go crazy overboard. It's one of you won last week, 1 week before. I kind of wouldn't, this would not be the week I'd reinvest all my winnings into a NASCAR line, because a lot of luck, and all it takes, or the big one happens and you could go from winning thousands of dollars to losing in, a couple seconds, one turn, one straightaway.
Yeah, that's the fun part. This is one of my favorite races of the year. So I'm just going to be enjoying it as a fan. I'm going to have multiple lines, and hopefully, some of them, those drivers avoid the wrecks and can take down some tournaments. But that'll do it for the Xfinity video. Our Cup videos could be saying a lot of the same things, but it's up live right now too. So we'll catch you over on that one.